Hi, and welcome to the Intellectual Adventure Podcast. Today we're here to present to you one topic that's very fascinating to all of us on the panel. Why, as an intellectual species, we wrestle with mortality. This is something that's hotly debated all the time, and as mortal beings ourselves, we feel like we can present to you good topics on discussing this. As we prepare for Christmas in this recording, we really wanted to insinuate having holiday fun and share some with you. If you have any comments, go ahead and suggest them on our website below. Thank you and enjoy the episode.
And Matthew is going to lead our discussion today. The question is, why, as an intellectual species, we wrestle with morality? And Matthew's going to see where this discussion takes us today. Go ahead.
Yeah, why, as an intellectual species, why do we struggle with morality? And I basically would just say, well, what is morality? And to me, many people of many cultures could argue and say that, well, morality, that's a simple objective of, God or my culture or my society or just my community of the people I interact with. But I would say that morality, in my opinion, is subjective due to the fact that there is multiple cultures, there is multiple religions, there's multiple societies. So, it falls into subjective context because for one thing that might be morally right could be morally wrong in another context. For a perfect example is that, maybe, for instance, in a certain religion, it's not okay to be unmonogamous or polyamorous. So that could be seen as immoral. But then somebody who has a polyamorous relationship in their religion, they could see it as not immoral at all, but perfectly fine because there's parties that are perfectly consenting and communicating. So I think that's why partially we also wrestle with morality because there's those multiple dimensions. And also ethically, the scale and the bar is constantly shifting. I mean, you could look perfectly example 60 years back, certain marriages such as LGBT marriages were considered not right. They were considered immoral. But now as culture and society has shifted and our norms have shifted, now that's perfectly normal. And we, as a conscious species, have sat down and had an argument and conversation, and as a group, as a community, a society, have come to the conclusion, well, this is really not that immoral because it's just two conscious human beings, Homo sapiens, that communicate and want to connect with each other. So what's so wrong about that? But there's, we could say that there's also other dissenting opinions that could argue that it's not okay. But I think that's where it comes into why we struggle with it.
Absolutely. The topic that you just brought up with the civil rights and kind of the dynamics there, it has a lot of effects on the mental health of populations. When you have such a deep divide, it's hard because it's not just a topic of choice. It's not just a topic around relationships. It's a topic around free will and being able to choose your course of action, choose your direct response to a situation you may not have even expected to become involved with. Like maybe it's something you learned about yourself down the road, and that's perfectly fine. I think that is, again, something I value, at least as an American. It's that freedom to allow others around me to make that choice personally. It doesn't have to affect my conscience. And that's where the problem lies, is when people they push the boundaries of what others may be comfortable with. And it's ultimately, I don't feel like it's respectful. You know, it's not always in the right context, or you're not always in the moral high ground to suggest something someone's not ready for all the time. It's like presenting Christianity on someone who's been presented it before. And I'm just using this as context for like example of something I'm familiar with. I've seen
I'm
plenty of
laughing
people
because this is one of
scared.
my examples.
Oh,
No, keep going.
but I've seen people become scared, you know, just because the format of how the information's suggested. I had a family member send letters upon letters, you know, and that kind of stuff is intimidating. And no one wants to be berated. They want to have fellowship, you know. They want to have counsel, you know, something productive, something positive, usually, or genuine. And it's that genuine connection that I feel like pulls people towards thinking there's a good and bad way of doing things.
Yeah, no, actually, if I can jump in right there, that's a
Absolutely.
really good point for Matthew and you both kind of touched on something that I was going to bring up later, but it's a good time to bring it up. So when you talk about morals, you have to first understand morals versus ethics, and they're very loosely interchanged terms, which is unfortunate because they do have different meanings. And morals is, I have one quote here in my notes, and I really love it. It's ethics grounds its arguments in reason, and morality grounds its arguments in tradition. And as Matthew was saying, 60 years ago, same-sex marriage was completely abhorred. It was something that we didn't really deem acceptable. It was happening in the shadows. People were going to different countries to different states to get married, just so that they could feel recognized in their belief that love is love. There's a certain level of empathy involved in morality as well. So when we're talking about morality versus ethics, there truly is that moment where morality is based on our own personal experience. And unfortunately, it's also based heavily in observer's bias, which is to say that we are limited in our scope of morality by what we have experienced or what we are capable of understanding. That is to say that if we don't have a complete experience of the entire human existence, there really isn't universal or objective morality. Instead, as Matthew was saying, we have subjective morality. There does, however, need to be a fine line, I think, between those two things, because I think we can pretty much universally agree murder is wrong. There's some instances where some people might try and argue differently. Some people will try and say, stealing from the rich is okay. And so you start to get into these moral dilemmas because, you're stealing from the wealthy. They have plenty, so stealing is not wrong anymore. But now, is it that a short justification from stealing from the wealthy is okay versus stealing from anyone is okay? Where do you draw the line?
It's like justification. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt.
Let's argue what is considered wealthy, because from the standard of me standing here in America, I could consider myself middle class, but you put me in a scenario with someone from a third world country that doesn't even have running water. I'm a very wealthy person, So yep. there's also that level to me of like argument of like, well, what even is wealthy,
Everything is subjective.
Everything is subjective, yeah. Would you want to comment on something?
That was it, sorry.
Okay. She said everything's subjective.
No.
But I was actually thinking possibly too is there's the context of dissenting opinions, we do have these social cues of like tribal mentality and mob mentality of like, there is that where it's like, well, I have this belief, you tend to want to move towards the majority than the minority of your own beliefs. I know there's that goes on a lot sometimes too.
Are you suggesting like peer pressure?
Yeah, like peer pressure. It's a mob mentality. I wish I could quote. That's actually, now I think about it, there was an experiment they actually did where they took a controlled group of people and they told people, well, 4 plus 4 is 5, and there's people in the group that were part of the experiment, and all the other people were placebos. And so then they said, well, no, it's not. And the placebos in the group would say, oh, yeah, it is. It's 5. And people who rationally understood that definitely 4 plus 4, I mean, 2 plus 2 is 4, not 5. Um, they started doubting themselves because the majority of the group started saying 5, 5. So they caved in to saying, oh, I guess it is 5. And I'll have to look up that experiment and I'll cite it within the notes later. But there is an experiment where they did that, and it was really fascinating because it tapped into that culture that we do have this because we're empathetic and compassionate creatures, and we want community. And possibly thousands of years of tribalism, and you needing to be part of the tribe to survive. Maybe that's what taps into our need for acceptance. So then we can cave into what the majority want compared to what our true values might be. That would be the minority.
That's a good term, actually, values, because values also differs from morals and ethics. So all of those things are a fun conversation. But carry on, Jeff. I just really like that you added the word values in there.
So what do you think? What do you think on that study, Jeff?
A lot of people suspend their education, training to go along with a crowd, basically, is what I got from that. That it was more important for them to go with the crowd and be accepted as opposed to
stand out and be intelligent or to be an outlier.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, nobody likes to stand apart anyways. Nobody wants to be alone. It's not, it's not safe to be alone, essentially. But what you were saying, like, everything is what I was suggesting, that it's all subjective. Like, what happens when people are part of that mob mentality, but they know that it doesn't feel right? Like, where do they stand then? Because then the morals and the ethics are coming into play, even though they were created, but now they're also understanding that it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good.
It goes against your values. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Where do you compromise your values?
Yeah.
No, exactly, and that's actually the point I've been trying to bring up is the whole instance of, like, what Cactus said over murder earlier. Like, collectively we feel that action's wrong. It's wrongful. You're doing that life ill, so to speak. Because I feel like you could murder an animal. It's not just exclusive to a human. That's my personal belief, and
absolutely.
I don't think it's got a species bias. But the thing is, like, there's other actions, justifications, and reskinnings of that action, but when that action's just being reformed or refaced, it still has the same root problem, which is it's still wrongful. It still feels wrongful. I feel like there's just, like, instances where emotions just connect and correlate. You see yourself in a situation and you wouldn't want to be in that. So it seems almost adamantly, innately wrong to want to value such a direct negative that would ultimately change your life or someone else's life. And some people, again, like psychopathic nature and things like that, there's definite differences in biology there. Things that I don't understand. I don't have a degree in psychology, but from basic understanding of social interactions, I see differences day to day. And there's all sorts of different people out there. I think that's wonderful, but it's something to keep in mind, that the tolerance level for these types of discussions tends to be different as well. What people are comfortable with accepting as part of their range of expression. You know, like maybe you're talking to someone who's never stepped foot in a church in their life, and they just get really angry when you talk about it. You would never understand unless you started talking to them and really understood the core of the situation. You know, maybe it's just scary to them. They think it's a cult. You know, and they step back. Oh, whoa. Like, and again, like there are situations where, you know, there's good and bad. It's always a good and a bad, quote unquote.
Or conversely, you were raised as a pastor's daughter and you really were in a cult in the church. And so the reason why your father gets angry when you talk about it is because of all of that, knowing what was going down. It's kind of interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I don't even mean to add in a personal sense. I just
No, not at all.
It's totally true. I mean, it happens a lot. Like Church of Christ is one I know personally that I'm not trying to bag on Church of Christ followers. I'm really not, but there are a lot of traditional values with that doctrine of Christianity that are forceful, and I can't confide to it, you know. But again, it's the people of that body that choose to make the interactions, that choose to push those interactions, and it's not, you can never label a whole organization simply around one core value, because there's always different variations. Hypocrites exist with everything, you know, and at the root, like humans are hypocritical creatures. Like we fail all the time.
But again, like speaking of the church example, that's another kind of mob mentality as well. Like people want to belong and they want to be there and be part of something. So they are willing to go along with something that doesn't seem right, but they don't know that it's not right if they've never had experience with it before. So there's that as well. So, but then, you know, everything kind of gets mixed up because, you know, the pastor is telling you that this is right and this is wrong, even though you might not feel that that's the way that it is. So things can get really mixed up in that as well. Your values can get all twisted. And I think that's what happens when things get turned into cult-like situations and whatnot, because they're able to manipulate that with people and take
that sense of belonging.
Yeah, and then this is where you belong, this is where you should be, and this is why, and that you need to follow this. So, you know, it's a lot of twists and turns when it comes to morality and ethics and values. You can really just
I'd have to agree.
Yeah, it's also an interesting branch in conversation where how morality is a guideline for law, but also differs from law in the sense that there's a lot of moral. I'll let you speak. I'm just going to close out my sentence. In the sense that we use the law as a way to say these are the rule sets to determine society. And then that's layered with morals, but there are definitely differentiations of the two. And I'll close that sentence there.
And before we move forward to Benjamin here, Joanne, I wanted to I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself properly to the audience. I just wanted to give you time to kind of warm up and you know, get adjusted on your end with Matthew. I know that sharing the mic's a little tricky sometimes with anything, so we completely understand, but I just wanted to give you that opportunity. Is there anything you'd like to introduce about yourself?
My name is Joanne, and basically what I said earlier, I've been a photographer for 17 years, 27 years, I think, actually. Is it 27? Oh my God. Anyways, I've been a photographer for a long time, and I am currently working on a photojournalist project regarding the Dixie Fire, and I also like to dabble in fire photography, and I've had my hand in a lot of different projects and like experiences, and it's way too much to talk about, honestly. But I have two kids, two daughters. And if you read my bio, a very chubby guinea pig.
Yeah, and you can check out that bio on the website.
Yeah, so I'm just really interested in expanding my intellect as far as these conversations go, and talking with like-minded people about different topics that are intriguing, and you never really know where they're going to go. And it's good to sit down and really just think about these things sometimes, and see what happens.
Well, we're really glad to have you on the show, and this project is really meant for anyone here to have fun and enjoy. You know, we don't want to create an environment that's too strict to lose that side of things. Again, the humanity in us is to create, to innovate, to push for something that we can find a community with, and I think that's great.
Yeah, we're here to grow.
And I'm a girl.
Yes, you're a girl. We will have to point this out. You are the first girl officially on the show.
We definitely did need a girl.
Yeah, it was a necessary evil, as they say. I had to. It's a, you know, it's a.
Benjamin was going crazy. He's like, we need one.
Oh yeah, Benjamin could.
Tired of all the guys in here nagging me about being late.
What?
Well, no, don't worry.
Okay.
You'll come to understand.
I thrown to the wolves, so it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Welcome to a podcast with mostly dudes. You don't know what you got yourself into, Joanne, but
I kind of was thinking that this morning when I woke up at 6 o'clock.
Yeah. Oh, it's okay.
Is it worth it?
We'll see. So far,
Oh man,
it's pretty intriguing and interesting. So
that's good. Anyways, let's go ahead and move forward and get back on the discussion. Benjamin, you're actually going to be next. Is there anything you'd like to discuss on the wrestling of morality?
Yeah, so actually everyone here has brought up a lot of really good kind of not nuances, but like each of them kind of delve into something that I wanted to talk about. I did some writing last night, and so I'm trying to like gather my thoughts on where to start with that. For me, at least, when I was writing, actually, Aquatic, your discussion or like pointing like there's ethics and morals really did kind of point out like, oh, they're all kind of interchanged, but then different realms. Like ethics is the rules, values is, I can't even remember what we specifically said about values, but morals is kind of like, for me at least, morals comes from morals is the discussion of what is right or wrong as a prologue to an event. So let's see if I'm using, because part of it is, how do we know when something is right or wrong? It's when, at least from my perspective, when our emotions drive us to act in a certain way, or perhaps to a point that we feel helpless. Evidently, like the range of human emotion is a lot more complex and varied than just fight or flight. However, our emotions really are kind of like our driving factor as humans. Our experiences and how we perceive the world very much influence, how we feel about it is going to influence how we act. So if we're presented with a situation or we hear about something that may perhaps we find significant, or we find something that's important in our lives, how we feel emotionally is going to drive us how we would react to that situation. There's not really an established like universal code behind what is right or wrong. I think we kind of talked about this, where there can be a universal code, like when we say, oh, thou shalt not kill, or you shouldn't do harm to other people, or at least to others, be it animals or plants, and it's, you know.
Yeah, there's a Jewish proverb for that one that's actually really good. I'm going to get it wrong. It's basically do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But it's more or less when you are in it's basically just have empathy. More or less, it truly is just have empathy. I'm not going to try and quote Jewish proverbs. I'm not going to disrespect the religion like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're going to keep this separate from that. But they did say it properly. It's basically you need to have empathy for other humans, and just to kind of help guide what you were saying, it's a Venn diagram. It's a very much a multi-layered Venn diagram. And as Cameron had mentioned, religion, he had kind of taken to a different aspect, but spirituality versus, so values, ethics, morality, and spirituality all intermingle in the same Venn diagram. And there's that overlap in the center. That is kind of human understanding of universal morals. That is, absolute right is that dead center where values, spirituality, ethics, and morals can all align and be with each other.
And that is very much like, especially being its ethics and values are what are taught to us. But morals, from my view, is the individual side of it, because everyone is going to have, as said, a different emotional connection or find different emotional importance with different events that happen. And so, with any of those, in an event of like, oh, you should not kill. Well, there are people who would argue that no, there are some points. What happens if someone is attempting to do ill will to me? Do I have the right to then harm them in return in defense of my person? If, let's say, people are talking, like if we're talking about us as animals, part of the natural whole of nature, should we not use trees to build our houses? Like, should we use sod and soil as the pioneers did? Well, then comes the question, what about the worm that gets disturbed by our digging and then gets eaten up by the bird? Or should we, abstain from meat and consume a living, breathing creature who feels fear as it is being slaughtered? Well, then what about the carrot that we just yank from the ground, wash off, and then munch on as a snack? It's the different sides of importance and value as to the connections that we have. And from that is, the issue is not exactly the action itself, because then necessity is going to drive us to act. Necessities, desires, and rationality. People can argue as much as they want before an event happens, but then once that event actually happens, morality comes into play afterward. Morality deals with the consequences of those actions. For me at least, it's the analysis of those consequences, being like, should we do this again? We have acted. Now should we act in the same way again? Is that right? Should we continue this way?
Yes. Yeah. That ties back to my original statement. Morality grounds its arguments on tradition. We typically base morality off of past experience, and I think it's why people will say that history is important and history repeats itself, is because we base a lot of our moral compass on what we've seen in the past. If we say mustard gas is now is just unethical and immoral to use because of how atrocious it was and how much damage it did to a human. Ironically, we said mustard gas was too horrible of a way to kill a human being while we were mowing them down with machine guns. But how they had that discussion on the same token, I'm not 100% sure.
Well, but even then, because it's the discussion, it's that, or at least in that sense, the people having that discussion were so far away from the front lines. They weren't those individuals on that front line. Even let's say perhaps captains. Exactly. If captains and lieutenants were on the front lines giving this information back to the superiors, it doesn't matter how much they convey. Like, oh, we've lost. I've lost 20 of my men. Perhaps some of those men were from his hometown. The commanding officer may just see that as like, oh, well, that's 20% for my 300 company. Maybe we should perhaps change this up. It's that emotional connection of people not seeing how it affects them. And I think that's another thing that delves into is it's the spheres of interaction, how the morals that you hold and how you portray that to the world may not confide, but they may not connect with others. And so, as we were saying, when it comes to religion, it's with that, like if there's that universal code within a community and someone acts against it and then they are ousted from that community, it's, that's robbing them of their identity. But there are other groups out there who may not even follow that, and they may go and find similar connection with those people. As difficult as it may be, that realm of understanding and universal code no longer holds significance. That emotional value has been disrupted or robbed, and so now there has to be a new one that comes into play.
May I touch on something that I'm not sure who brought up the golden rule. I was out of the screen, but you said that it is empathy, right? Was that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, that was you.
Benjamin.
So what happens when you encounter somebody with little to no empathy at all? Because there are people out there who just don't have any empathy. They don't know how to have it. They don't have.
Yeah, psychopaths
just don't have it. So what happens when you? No, not necessarily. Not sociopaths.
Oh well, so psychopaths can turn them on and off, but people who are truly abject from emotion.
One of my daughters is like that. And so I just wonder, like, what happens when you encounter that, who's seemingly like normal person, normal. I don't know that there is a normal, but, and you encounter that and they have understanding, but no empathy. Like they can't have that emotional connection without all of that. So then where do morals and values and ethics come into that? Like, where does that come into play for that?
For me, at least, and Cameron, I think that you and I might connect more on this. For me, at least, that's where I think a lot of philosophy and perhaps discussions come into play. Of in the face of people acting a certain way, it kind of similar to that mob mentality of everyone else is going along with this way. Should I also then act in this manner? Or perhaps it's when you encounter someone who perhaps isn't as empathetic as you, the minute that you meet someone like that, do you then stop being empathetic? Do you, in response to that person, tell yourself, well, they're not going to be empathetic, so I'm not going to be empathetic to them? Or do you say, even though they are not being empathetic to me, shall I continue to be empathetic? Shall I let this person decide how I'm going to react? The golden rule, I would say, with that is do you want to, whoever has, I'm reading the chat here, treat others the way you want to be treated. The minute that someone treats me without empathy, should I go and immediately treat them the same way? More often than not, no. I'm still going to try to be the most empathetic person that I can be, situation presenting. Sometimes it's very hard. Sometimes people are extremely rude and belligerent and uncaring, and that makes it extremely difficult. But at the same time, are you going to let that decide how you act?
Yeah.
That goes into your values, right?
Yeah, well, it goes into your values of that if you take it undue to others as, treat them as they're treating you, but then you stop and you're like, well, no, my standard and value is that, for instance, I could actually give an example, like at work, you show up to a station and it's dirty, they leave it dirty, and I could say, well, I'm going to leave it dirty now because they're treating my station with disrespect and not cleaning it up for me. So I'm going to do the same. And it's like, well, no, but my values are that we have a standard that we need to keep the station clear and clean. So even though that they are dirtying the station and that is not fair to me, I'm going to keep my values and character in a line and keep it clean. And then if it gets to the point of escalation of confrontation, of calling a person out, you can compassionately, say, hey, you're doing this wrong. There's a certain standard. Could you please clean up the station for also just the respect of me, but also the standard is and the values are is that we keep the station clean. If I may want to go back onto World War One and some of the things you were saying about mustard gas and everything, that to me ethically, I've actually kind of pondered that. And I think it's interesting because it's like you look back on warfare, all the way back to medieval times. It's like, there was that honor aspect of like, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to fight you with another sword. And like the ability, like you had full respect and full interaction with another human being, that you were going to like take this person's life, look them square in the eyes, with honor and compassion, and like it's like dignity, that you're gonna take this person's life, but you're gonna experience everything right here and then. Compared to now, technology has advanced to the point that you could literally be on a monitor and have a drone fly over, and you don't even get to interact with those. You don't have all those experiences of touch, feel, taste, smell, like experiencing that person's presence in the here and now. And I feel like also possibly with biological warfare, I think why they said like mustard gas was ethically like immoral almost was because there with a bullet there's like maybe that physical interaction of like pulling a trigger compared to where you release some kind of chemical. It breaks down a person's cells and it destroys them on such like it's like a horrific it's a biological level that's just horrific. It like I mean, you could just look at you look up a bullet wound compared to like something that's like a chemical that literally broke down the visage of a person's face. And I think people ethically, it's just horrific to the point where that's where people draw the line.
If I may, I don't know if you have any more points on that, Matthew.
Yeah, I think I'm good right there. But
okay, I wanted to tag back to Benjamin's response. I actually, and it kind of goes off of what Joanne was kind of asking to the group about her daughter's situation with, lack of empathy. I don't really know your daughter personally, and it's hard to gauge justly, to the situation, that personal situation. But I can attest to one thing that I personally believe it really takes work to understand where you stand when it comes to relationships. So you have to really, you have to want to be involved. It's no different than a work situation. It's like love. Anyone who's had a relationship knows that love takes work. You don't just show up one day fit and healthy and fed and, financially stable. I wish, but you have to work for those things. And in that situation, that just sounds like a disconnect from society, which a lot of youth are doing. No,
that's true.
To me,
yeah, that's a good point.
Doesn't sound like a psychopath, and I don't think Cactus meant it or implied it. And I'm not saying anyone took it that way, but it just shows how vastly varied each individual is in each situation. When it comes to these things, it is a huge scale of colors. There's a reason why these topics have been delved into for centuries. It's truly complicated stuff, and then you implement different religions and spiritualities to the situation, and it's even more complicated because you're going off of faith, and for a lot of people that's important. For others it means nothing. It's like honor. To me, honor means something. To others, I definitely know it means nothing.
No honor among thieves.
That's a good point, though, that the youth now are incredibly disconnected, and I would venture to say that her lack of empathy is probably more trauma based. I don't need to go into that, but it's probably more trauma based. But it's not it's starting. Yeah, it could be. They're always on their Kindles or their phones, or something's going on, and they rarely go out and socialize. So it could be part of that too. But she just kind of, and she knows that she's not empathetic. She's aware of it. She's like, I just don't have empathy. It's not like she's like mean or, you know, anything like that. She's not a sociopath as far as I know, but she's not. She's a really cool kid. I shouldn't have said that.
No, you're in
fine.
regards to struggling.
She's a pretty cool kid, but she is aware of it, and I do understand. I had a conversation with someone about that, it is a thing that people tend to have no empathy, and it's just that they just don't. And it's a learned trait, though. It is partially learned, I believe. Like,
well, it's like the conditioning that they're gonna have struggles with the new generation, because there's a lot of actual audio cues you need as a little kid to look at the lips and see how to pronounce certain words and letters. And there's gonna be
body language
that's gonna be behind and struggle due to wearing masks.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. I mean, our actions in society directly affect the youth, so it's definitely a point to keep in mind. And
kind of stumbled there a little bit.
Well, and kind of the wrap up that the point with what we're saying here is, I honestly think that it's a very beautiful thing to have the internet and have those resources available to study, but the over stimulation, you know, adds desensitization, and that's been a big problem for empaths, especially, or just people in general, but even empaths struggle with that. There's times I know I'm an empath, but there's plenty of days where I'm like, no, screw the world. You know, I would want to be disconnected, but I know I can't, like, because I care too much. I'm too invested in this place, and if I really meant that, I would have done it. I wouldn't be running podcasts. You have to find self-justification sometimes, but that's a very personal journey. And it doesn't mean it has to morally be wrong to do so either. You should be allowed to make your decisions and make your choices for yourself first, to make sure you're grounded. That's something I had to learn, especially coming out of religion. And again, I don't view that time of my life as a negative, but I definitely view some aspects it presented me with personally, mentally, as negative because of the way I perceived them. I wasn't ready to perceive that information.
As a fellow empath, I'd have to agree with that whole not wanting to go out into the world, but still wanting to put things out there to, like, you know, like, I don't want to say teach people, just like help them understand things. Have that be a thing, like that's, you know, the Dixie Fire Stories Project. That's really terrifying for me sometimes, because it's putting me out there. It's really like throwing and I just want to go hermit mode is fun. Just gonna say that. So, but it's the desensitization, and it's the people might not be as empathic, but on the other side of it, they're overly too much too. They don't have the social cues, and they don't have a way of understanding society in general. And so a lot of times their morals and their values don't align generally with what we think is right or wrong, because they see things online, they see things that are being shown to them through, you know, different forums, and it just it's probably confusing, you know, to have on one hand this whole idea of social media, and then on the other hand your parents who are have gone through generations like without all of that, and you know, it's hard to kind of guide them through that, and to have that, you know, be able to that's hard to navigate. I think I made my point. I'm not sure. Yeah, no, that's actually one of the points that I have written on there, and I'll touch more on that after, because a couple people have more things to say, and then I do actually have a response into
what we can do in regards, or what I believe we can do in regards to people who have little to no empathy. Speaking as someone who has autistic spectrum disorder, and is typically regarded as having no empathy, but I just don't believe that that's the case. I think it's a misunderstanding, or it's just not the case in my specific situation. As Cameron mentioned earlier, biology is quite different.
It's really hard to tell, man. I feel like a very angry person, but I don't know how people view me. I know how I view myself, and I always view myself as pretty angry, but it's because I spite the world. There's a lot of things about the world that make me angry. I have no control over that. I just exist, you know? So that's a little tough
thing, man. Can't change the whole world.
Exactly. And that's where the stage I feel like I'm at personally in life is reassessment. Because I don't want to feel that way all the time.
With reassessment, one thing I was actually kind of thinking that I could tie in is I'm like, so with this new age of technology and the new world that we live upon social media, I was thinking maybe the world right now is developing its own new culture of ethics and values. And maybe that context is like, I was watching a video where they were talking about doom watching and doom scrolling, and like, you know, you're absorbing all this media that you get into this spiral of watching all these horrible things over and over and over. And then you get to this point where you get this very nihilistic, and it creates this nihilistic and rigid perspective. And then that's when people start to descend into very negative opinions, and they're commenting on other people's social media platforms and saying very vitriolic things when they have no idea who that person is and such like that. So maybe I was thinking is that maybe there's this value that's going to maybe start developing ethically, where it's like, you know, hey, doom scrolling is not, you know, a very morally right thing to do, because we know the repercussions of what that will end up with. And then you will go down into a descent of not, you know, socially not a very good person, because then now on your social media platform, what are you engaging with other people on this digital platform? You're being negative and toxic. And I was kind of thinking what you guys think of that idea of maybe there is a do you guys interacting with social media, do you notice that maybe there's a value system and ethics being developed upon that?
Real fast. Mine's very, very quick. It's about vitriolic. Did not know about that word. That's a very good word to use for the context at hand, though, Matthew. I just wanted to commend you there. And for those who don't know, it's deep criticism and malice. I thought that was cool. Benjamin.
Also malevolent. You can become malevolent.
Benjamin, hey, are you twisting something, Benjamin?
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, sorry. Mechanical business.
Yeah, of course you would.
Sorry, I'm out of the room.
Oh my, no, you're fine. It was definitely
ADHD,
Benjamin.
man.
The fidget.
Yeah, it's okay. I do it too. I just
My mic has the noise. If it ever does come through, just let me know. But yeah,
that's my weird thing. I just like squeezing my fingers. I don't know. We're all a little fidgety here. Anyway, so Benjamin, please, by all means.
I mean, what we're talking about, it's not necessarily easy. So.
Oh yeah, of course. And I also want to interject too, Jeff. I believe you have a point afterwards, and we'll let you respond with your point after Benjamin too.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm patient. I got my stuff written down.
I was going to say, Jeff, if you want to go ahead, you haven't really gotten much of a chance to speak yet, so I'm going to open up the floor to you.
Actually, I was giving Rusty a chance to say his piece.
Oh yeah, he's contributing.
Oh no, is it that time? Man, yeah, Cactus loves you for that, by the way. I love editing that
super
part.
fun. That was a super great 10 minutes listening to the rooster over and over and over again.
Yeah, this one's for you then. You know,
I'm trying to give him away to all my friends. I was like, I'll pay for shipping.
Yeah, they're easier to ship when they're about this big, and all fuzzy.
I'll find a way.
So I only have a couple of things. As far as the morals, morals are taught to us, starting with our parents, who learned it presumably from their parents, but also organizations that they may have belonged to along the way. Churches, community gatherings, that kind of thing. To Matthew's point, it was the group think, group act takes over. There's also other, shall we say, organizations, and I'll just put that up right there, that teach their own set of values and their own. Let me just say that it separates them from, say, a Protestant church or a Catholic church or a community center that teaches its own set of values, so that that particular organization can get ahead in society. Not necessarily get ahead of society, but it depends on the organization. As for, let's see, in the last 60 years or even more, there's been a push for society to not make and raise families, not have kids. And I think that's more of a cultural thing than a moral thing. There's immorality in it, but it's a cultural shift to reduce us, the USA, as a world leader, and to dilute what it is that we have been teaching around the world, the freedoms that we have. So in that regard, there is a morality push or an anti-morality push on the world stage by different cultures who would think that they're perhaps above someone else or above a different culture. Their culture is better than somebody else's culture. And that's pretty much where I can leave it.
Well, if I may, on that point real fast too, it's like organizations can eat themselves from the inside out too. There's plenty of organizations under the same banner, so to speak, that definitely don't agree. And that's kind of what I was touching on earlier. Is I was not touching on the Christian doctrine as a whole, but with my experience of certain situations with groups, that group thought, that peer pressure, man, where they feel like the pastor says one thing, that's the word of God, and that's the push they needed to shove. And unfortunately, that's the power religion has on people. Some people use and manipulate that for bad reasons. That's not unique to our generations.
Yes, and as far as different religions around the world, it's not just Christianity that teaches their set of morality, their set of morals. Who's right in the end, So I guess that's what all I got on that.
No, that's honestly a great perspective. Thank you, Jeff.
It's not like it wasn't about picking on religion as a whole. I didn't see it that way at all, because in my experience with what I had dealt with, it was a specific group, a specific organization. I just wanted to clarify that, because I know that you've said that a couple times, so I didn't know if that was something you were concerned about as far as that goes.
No, I it's a very intimate conversation in my family, because it's it happened to almost every one of my family members who've had a negative situation with religion. All the way from just judgment to assault. So it's very hard to accept what's reality, what the reality of the situation is. And the reality of the situation is I don't know the whole religion, what goes on and what happens. I don't think any of us do. That there's too much going on and there's too many opinions. Even in quote unquote Jesus's time, you couldn't. I don't think you could tell then. There were still splinter groups then, what they perceived Jesus as. So, and again, like I only speak from Western philosophy mostly because that's what I understand. I know a little bit about Islam and
I was actually
Muslim
just about to
culture.
mention Islam and Christianity differ pretty vastly on what they believe Jesus to be.
Yeah, that's a prime example. Absolutely
Islam
prime
believes
example.
Jesus to be a prophet of the Lord, not the son of the Lord, or not the embodiment of the Lord, as Christianity typically depicts him to be. They do recognize him as a holy figure, but they typically recognize Jesus as just a prophet of the Lord.
Yeah, it's truly interesting to see how these cultures differ. I mean, it's even like the story of Agartha. I had a phase where I thought there was an inner Earth. I as a geologist, as a person interested in geology, kind of redacted on that. I just couldn't. I still can't wrap my mind around it. But a part of me wants to, right? The soul in me wants to believe that, and believe it as something that is tangible, something I can understand. But the truth is, reality is something we can't really fully understand all the time. What power, like what right do we have to understand that? That's kind of where I ask is how much do we deserve to have control over? Is there a reason, if there is a higher power, we're objectively confined?
And
I always wonder that.
And ethically or morally, would it be right? Like, would that be something that we should have in our control? Right.
Yes.
Because where then would that the world would be even more chaotic, most likely. It's already chaotic, but then throw that in there. They have, well, that's a whole other conversation. You kind of do have control over what you can create, but only because, how you present yourself to the world and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's like how, like ethically, should we have that kind of power? And then that's a whole, yeah.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to dive in. We actually are doing great on time, guys. So.
Well, there's that whole idea that, our thoughts become reality, right? If you're having a bad day, you're going to continue to have a bad day because you're stuck in this bad moment of like, wow, my day is really bad. Then you stub your toe and then all these things happen. And it's really just like your emotions are leading your day kind of deal, right? So you're creating your own reality by staying in that negative mindset. So if you change your mindset and you right, you attract what you are. So yeah, you manifest. So you attract what you are. And so if you're having a bad day, you're going to attract bad things. That negative energy is going to be attracted to you. That's kind of what I was going at. So like, we don't technically have control over our reality. We just have control over how we respond to our reality, I guess, is kind of where I was going with that. And so probably ethically, it wouldn't be a good idea for us to have control over that, I would imagine. Like, there's just too many, what's the word I'm looking for? There's too many
Variables?
Yes, thank you.
There's
too many variables. It's just not, it wouldn't work, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Where is the line of where? That's a difficult sentence to verbalize. My brain has figured it out, but my mouth hasn't quite figured out how to get there. Where do we draw the line, essentially, as to what is within our realm of control and within our purview of essentially judgment when you come down to the terms of morals, ethics, values, and spirituality? Judgment is pretty squarely at the center of all of those things. And we've had a really good discussion as to how each one of those things tie in. We've had a couple of great points, a couple that I wanted to touch on, especially, Christianity and things like that. Talked about how it's also a splinter religion of paganism and things like that. Christianity didn't agree with paganism's moralistic views and didn't agree with certain practices of pagan religions and other religions before paganism, but it still decided to spread its view, and indoctrination by the sword, unfortunately, was a common practice. And we look back now, 2,200 years later, actually not so much later for Christianity and other religions, 700 years or so was the last indoctrination by the sword I think they record. And that is to say, like, mob mentality, as we were talking about earlier. You were forced to take on a Christian belief in medieval society in a lot of places, just because they literally conquered your entire city, country, town, whatever it may have been, and told you, you believe what we believe, and if you don't, you will be executed, and you will be publicly executed to be made an example of. So in that regard, intelligence was feared, science was feared. We didn't have the luxury to question our own morality, to question our own values. We had indoctrination forced upon us, hence the term indoctrination.
And art was feared as well. All of that, especially.
Truly, yeah, expression. Yeah, expression was a horrible thing. How dare you, have an ideology different from their moral compass? And that's a moral dilemma in and of itself. They truly, in hindsight, overstepped their bounds of what was moral, and their whole conquest in the Inquisition was incredibly immoral and incredibly unethical. But, we look back with the hindsight of 2,000 years of experience and a lot of advances in technology and society. So a little bit of bias, I believe.
Well, and then what was I reading today? There was, with the art piece, like, it's just the artist is expressing themselves in a manner that they may not be able to verbalize, right? So that was essentially really feared, because then they're getting this creation, this beauty, this new idea out there, and the church had really no control over that, so they just wanted to stop it, I believe. Just shut it all down, which is really sad, actually. But
most of it, because art is very provoking, they actually more on the lines harnessed it, because the Catholic Church, or for example, the Catholic Church had all the money, so they are able to use that tool to actually bastardize and demonize, literally demonize other religions. When the Holy Roman Catholic Church was competing with other pagan religions, they actually took the deity Pan, and that's where you get the stereotypical clove-torn devil, because they literally took Pan and they painted him on these cathedral murals all over the walls, and made everyone, the sinners, always being eaten by Satan and hell and all these horrific things. And they were able to actually harness that tool of self-expression and use it as a tool to make the masses fear the idea of hell. And then that created a values of control, because now you have morals involved of what is right and what is wrong, and that's it's black and white. It becomes black and white. And when you think about it, you're a peasant, and you're not really in a very you're living in a hut, and then you step inside this cathedral, and I could see yourself being totally intimidated by this giant a mural full of all this art that it impacts you deeply. Symbolism is a very powerful thing.
makes you feel small, makes you feel human while they're trying to express a spiritual plane and a plane of cosmological existence. And you're very much right. They painted a very grandiose picture. You know, these cathedrals were hundreds of feet tall with large spires, and they're beautiful stained glass window murals painted of angels depicted with, you know, beautiful golden wings. It was always grandiose. It was always, you know, the most beautiful depictions, the most, you know, that had to be the thought-provoking art that you were exposed to, was inside of those cathedrals, because had you, you know, gone and be exposed to other art, it might have allowed you to think, oh, well, maybe worshiping the tree god was actually a better idea. Maybe the pagans had it right. You know, maybe one god is not the way. You know, we want to be moved to a monotheistic culture rather than a multi-theistic culture.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how those dynamics play out. Benjamin, I don't know if you could help me recall right now. I know the Dark Ages aren't, I mean, you guys might know too, but the Dark Ages aren't referred to as the Dark Ages anymore. It's the, I forget what that age is.
That is a detail that my brain is either kiboshed or...
Yeah, I can't recall right this second, but the what's that? Reclamation? Oh, Reformation. Yeah, it is the Reformation age. I remembered it was kind of a obscure terminology for the time, but a lot of why they changed it was because of the culture and the art of that period. The Middle Ages as well, the early, late, and middle parts of it were all very dynamic when it came to religion. And that's something I love studying, is especially the psychology of the day-to-day life in such a society. And it's a tragedy, you know, and when you look at it, there's tons of loss for tons of cultures. But also when you're involved in societies at such a scale, it's no different than monopolization at a point. It's just a different way of doing such things. I mean, if we're reliant on supply chains and certain systems to a degree in our countries in modern times, then it really is comparable to a degree of what similarities are when it comes to work-life patterns. We work less hours because there's been some civil progression, I would call it, over centuries, where people have identified that it's not good for the youth. It's not good for practically anyone. I mean, science has improved. Let's be honest. I think most parties can agree that science has just improved. We generally have more agreements on certain subjects when it comes to that, and that has helped motivate people into a direction where there can be more progression towards a society where we're not fight for honor as much as we're trying to just manipulate systems that have already been implemented. So a lot of people that want what others have, right? A lot of jealousy. And that comes with careers too. It goes with the stereotype of a greedy doctor. We think of a doctor as again, like an honorable profession, but there's plenty of cases where doctors have manipulated that for their own gain. Pastor, that's another example.
Doctors literally have like a code of ethics, like
Exactly.
that they have a built code of ethics, and if they cross those ethics, and if they're held to a board, and if they can be proven that they've crossed those ethics, their license can be ripped from them.
Yeah, the Hippocratic Oath is a very sacred document for that field. It's something I had to study when I was studying to go into medicine. It was one of the first things my teacher taught me. She's like, I don't care what you have to say. Like, you're going to learn this.
You have to.
Like, and she made that very clear to me. And I valued that because it was like, this is a person I can trust because they appreciate the art for what it is, or the work for what it is. And it's very important. Sometimes we have to define that things are done not just for ourselves, but for the good of humanity.
Well, that's actually an interesting concept you kind of bring up right there, where it's like for the betterment of humanity. And I think there's a lot of times in history where it's like we have done heinous things for the greater good, and a lot of really bad things have happened that we've actually we've gained. I mean, for example, that pops into my head is for instance, in World War II, the Nazis actually did experiments upon the Jews where they would actually put them in compressed chambers, or they would throw them into capsules full of ice, and they would measure their body temperatures and figuring out when hypothermia kicks in. Of course, what ended up happening is many of the Jewish population perished due to that. But in the information that we gained from learning about the limits of the human body on a physiological level, we partially couldn't have even gained that knowledge without that sacrifice. Was it an unconsensual sacrifice? Yes. Was it morally wrong? Yes. But we still ethically wrong? Did we still gain from it? I mean, you could say, if you wanted to go on a weird objective rational psychopathic kind of way, it's like, oh well, it was a good sacrifice. We gained knowledge that probably could save a lot of lives, because now people who go in colder climates have that knowledge and they can prepare accordingly. But it was a sacrifice that was not really exactly consensual.
I was just saying that there's no armed guards up in the Tibetan monk temples, and they're exposed to incredibly cold temperatures, and it's just a normal thing. You've got people in modern days like Wim Hof, and it's been a thing in Swedish cultures for years to do ice baths. You cut holes in the ice, and you're jumping into freezing temperatures. So you've got people willing to expose themselves to these conditions. You definitely didn't have to force people into containers to do it. So, and again, we have the blessing of the scope of history to really guide us in that regard, to give us that scope for the moral compass. And in regards to, as Cameron was saying, the testing conditions, there's no reason to force someone to subject to that type of thing, when typically the willingness of humanity to see value in sacrifice is actually quite profound. And one of the points that I was going to bring here up is, there's always that moral dilemma of, is my sacrifice, is my input, what I deem my values going to benefit the tribe? Because we are selfish creatures, but we also understand, I believe it was Joanna that said, to be alone is a danger. It's very dangerous to be alone. There's no safety in being isolated. If you're diseased, you have no one to care for you. You have no one to take you to find medicine. You have no one to cook food for you if you're disabled. You have none of these abilities, none of these amenities that are allotted to you if you have a tribe who's able to gather food, who's able to have a medicine man, who's able to have all of these things. We've taken the tribe mentality and just expanded it, but forgot how to benefit the tribe. When we started to become, okay, the tribe is a corporation. The tribe is Monsanto, the tribe is Pepsi, the tribe is whichever corporation you want to throw in there. These are the people that, they have money so they can inform decisions that impact our life. The currency system is what leads a lot of our decisions, unfortunately. And it causes people to shift their viewpoint from the self and from the local to this grand scope of how can I directly affect everything around me and all the things that I see. And it creates this conflict within oneself, I believe, where you see it and you just go, how do I change the world? And, morally, how do you change the things you see that are wrong? And as someone who's struggling with autistic spectrum disorder, I may see something as completely morally bankrupt, and somebody else may see it as, well, it's completely justified. And Benjamin touched base on this. It's fair because they treated me this way. You're going to completely disregard your values, your morals, your values, your ethics, because it's fair. And morals are there to help us, guide us in emotional times, because our emotions are not exactly the best decision makers, but making purely ethical decisions has consequences too. If you make decisions without morals, you're left with a lacking in judgment where you don't consider the human experience.
But that right there is why we struggle with morality. All of that just kind of touched on the question at hand. That's exactly why we struggle with that.
Yeah, I agree. And if I may, I remember my point from back then. I don't know why I said yen. So I was Nagasaki and Hiroshima are prime examples of what Matthew was saying. The same thing. I mean, we're dealing with a country that wanted to fight to the last for their honor, and they were also doing some horrendous human testing. And how many people in their country knew about that? Not a lot. Similar thing with Germany. I mean, there were definitely more cases in Germany from records that I've understood to know, but it doesn't mean that you have to weigh the options, and that's exactly what they did in World War II. I think they made the right choice. It's terrible, and most Americans agree. It's a very terrible weapon, but sometimes you can't play nice when you're dealing with world powers. You're dealing with world structures where a whole sense of morals and ethics go out the window, and everything's in survival mode. And I think that shows testament to who we are as a species. I really try to look past the spiritual side all the time and look at my physical sense and realize, I'm very tethered to my habits. There's certain things that I tend to want to do more than other things, and I can change that, but it's gradual. And I can only accept people for their own habits, or I reject it. But if I want to be an accepting person, I have to learn how to grow my scope of what I understand life to be. It's kind of like what Anthony Bourdain was talking on before he supposedly hung himself. Because I don't believe that either. I really do think that he was on to a good point when it came to culture. Exactly.
Nice.
You know,
I love Kitchen Confidential.
Yeah, he knew what was going on. I think that's a great reference.
Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, just in case anyone couldn't read it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cactus. And I just would recommend, if that's a subject you're kind of interested in, Anthony Bourdain's a great source to I'd say expand your horizons in a gentle sense, because that's someone who mastered the art of doing something like that. I truly.
He's incredibly well spoken. He's incredibly well spoken for a chef. Like I'm very surprised. Everything I've ever seen by him, it's easy to digest. It might not be the easiest topic to handle. It might be talking about something difficult, but it's easy to digest. I highly recommend pretty much anything he talks about.
Yeah, I mean, here I have a.
No.
Let's see. You guys can go ahead and say your point. I'll pull this book out. If you guys have anything to bring up right now.
Yeah, I've got an interesting bookcase full of books. If anybody care to browse through them, I've got things on Zen, and I've even got Bruce Lee's philosophy, which is interesting in itself. So, anyone who want to come over and browse the bookshelf, they're welcome.
I'm pretty sure I know where you live, so I'll be knocking on your door soon.
Okay.
Nice. The definitive oral biography for Anthony Bourdain. Nice.
Yeah. I found this in an airport. I still need to read through it. It's not small. Really good though. I would definitely recommend. I've gotten a third of the way through. So far it's greatly detailed, and I think there's like over 50 testimonies in here or something. It's crazy how much effort they put into this, but in my opinion, that genuinely shows like people value what he had to say in that industry. Like he was really onto something with his points, and a lot of it has to do with accepting where you draw the line. That's a very personal journey. Like I said, it's part of the reason I've always connected. Well, not always, but later in life connected more with Anthony Bourdain, because he very much about the unfiltered perspective, which honestly, that's kind of why I like doing these shows. People will probably notice that there's some, especially when I'm editing, I'll do maybe 70 or 80% of edits, clean it up, but usually I'll leave some mistakes because I want people to understand that I want people to understand that we're only human in this process, and just like there with Cactus throwing me off so politely, I find humor in it. I'm not angry, I'm not upset. I just think it's comical because we have a healthy enough relationship and dynamic here. We're able to interact in that kind of way, and it not be a jab at the ego. And that's important to me. I value that. I wanted to actually step back and go ahead, and I believe we're moving into finalizing Joanne's points. If Joanne has any, is she?
I don't know where she went. She
no problem.
Ate or whatever.
Yeah, we'll wait. We'll wait to touch back with her on that point. Aquatic. Is there anything on the subject you wanted to reflect back on right now? We touched on a lot.
Oh man, that's what I was gonna say, man.
Yes.
There was one point. This is going to be. I kind of lost my train of thought going through all the topics, but I wanted to kind of jump a little further back onto the technology. I didn't want to interrupt at all because these were all really, really interesting points. And for me, at least, when it comes to technology and sorry, I just read the chat. For me, with technology, in the discussion of like, is there like a moral? Are there morals, or is there like a morality that's going to come from technology? I felt that kind of tied back in with the World War I thing, because the technology of the First World War that became prevalent, the machine gun, artillery, mustard gas, tanks, aeronautics, like all these different things, the people who were commanding and sending these armies off did not have an understanding of that technology. The technology superseded the knowledge of those in charge at the time. So oftentimes
so new.
It was so new. Like no one up there had any frame of reference. For me, at least, that's no excuse to send the men off as they did. Evidently, it was you can't change the mentalities of people now. Back then, we can only move forward now. But with that with that sense of technology, seeing how with social media and technology is advancing at the rate it is now, we have a podcast like this. There are certain things that you might be able to follow on, let's say, YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. But for the most part, it's a free form of expression and entertainment. There can be guidelines that are set up by these companies, but for the most part, they don't really care. So there's not really a morality or philosophy being taught to people as they come out. People can bring their own. Cameron.
I didn't mean to throw you off.
Sorry, I just went through it.
It's so weird. My damn Santa.
Oh my god.
I was about to make a comment about kids. I was like, "Oh, perfect, Santa." Now we're gonna. Now it just sounds creepy, and now I just start saying that.
There was a misinput. Sorry.
What were you doing before you were rudely interrupted by that Santa gear that was thrown?
Yeah, I didn't. Santa jump scare apparently.
Good.
Yeah, Santa throws some wrenches in the gears here.
Oh shit! Hold on. Oh yeah. Okay. So I do remember my point. It is. I think the issue now is that technology is, as that said, it's superseding understanding. It's superseding generations of understanding and of knowledge. Like if you went and you saw, I remember when Congress was having that hearing on TikTok and social media, and the questions that they were asking the CEO of TikTok, or
We're
even
still out of touch.
It's just so they don't understand the realm, or like they don't understand the technology enough. There's such a divide there, to the point that the CEO is kind of like, well, you guys don't really have any idea of what we're actually doing here. And that's the issue, is that with that then is if with kids having completely unrestricted access to social media and such, they're connecting and they're seeing all this stuff. I'm not a parent. I don't have any say over, what people should be teaching their kids, or, how they should be, parenting. It's the technology, though. People don't understand yet how it's really going to be affecting these coming generations, especially coming from COVID, when everyone was just so separated. And on top of that, you have people that are like, I think it's parents who are like, they're too busy. They're trying to provide for their families, and they don't have really time to hang with their kids. They just hand their kids their phone, because that's the best way to help keep those kids focused on the task so that parents can work. And it's with that, unless you're following like a philosophy or morality page on that social media, the algorithms are going to be feeding you whatever you really kind of find interesting. So there's no real backdrop or structure to how people should be approaching technology and such, or at least for the younger generations, perhaps. And then there's that divide, there's that separation there that people may not understand.
Well, unfortunately, there's a fun thing about technology is without any form of moral or ethical discriminator, what technology does is it's anything you interact with, which includes dislikes or anger or vitriol-filled comments. That is to say that can't remember who brought it up, but someone mentioned doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is a very vicious cycle because when you start to feed into negative posts and negative content, it's going to show you more controversial content because you interact with it, because you spend time with it. And the only thing that those companies value is your time and your engagement, because the more you engage with it, the higher chance of you interacting with one of their ads and one of their placements. So because it's business driven and it's as I was saying, there's value-based decision making rather than any form of compassion or empathy or moralistic type of decision making process, you end up with what we look at as morally bankrupt. You look at gotcha games. Funny enough, RuneScape was one of the most popular games growing up. It was super popular. I think it started 2004, gained massive popularity 2007, all the way through 2012. But the game has vicious gambling habits that they've since removed to keep the game alive because most of their investors were pulled. But they actually had really, really aggressive marketing strategies that would try and pull finances from kids. And then they were allowing kids to go into a literal gambling scene where you would have not quite a 50-50 chance, but almost a 50-50 chance. You would gamble your in-game currency that you could buy with real world currency, which was the issue. And you could then just go and get your parents' credit card, spend thousands of your parents' money, and lose it all in a gambling situation for underage children. And it's like, well, that's morally bankrupt. But then they're like, well, it's for entertainment. And, it's a business. They have to make money somehow.
Right.
Well, where do we draw the line between commerce, morals, and ethics?
I actually, I see you, Joanne, too. I'll let you respond after. But I actually knew someone in one of the towns we were hanging out. We had a friend group together, and this person was like, "Oh, you know what? I got you. I'll cover the group payment." And we ended up doing laser tag, and this individual ended up yeah, I think you can guess who it might have been. That was a hint. Yeah, it's a prime example though of peer pressure and situations where when you're in your youth, you're not practiced with financial discipline. They got us. And if you ask Benjamin and I now, we'd probably both have the same response. Was it worth the amount of money? No.
I got a very stern lecture following that. So it's hopefully I'm gonna. Sometimes it was fun in the moment, but now looking back, it's like should have thought.
I'm sure that was one of the biggest financial lessons Benjamin had in his youth. It was just a laser tag event, and he paid for the group, but the group never paid him fully back. And it's just how the ball rolls. But my point with that was the marketing, because that was in an arcade, and I mean, they know that kids have moms and dads, bank account most times available where they can pull from that, and it is just an untapped market, and it's unfortunate, man. Especially around the holidays, Christmas and such. You're making all these ads blow up to where maybe these families that can't afford all these really cool toys for their kids, now the kids are a little bit more judgmental because they're like, well, Johnny over here has this, and you guys can't do this. Like, you just must not care. Like, for a kid,
right? What's wrong with my parents?
Yeah,
and get a Cabbage Patch doll.
It's tough.
I actually remember back when I think the first iPhones or the first I believe it was the first iPhones started to were commercially produced. I remember some of my classmates back in, I believe it was 7th or 8th grade, who started getting those. And I didn't actually get my first phone, which was like a very small, it was a touch screen, but you really had to, it felt like a button phone. But I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, I want one of those. I really, like, that's so cool and stuff. But then my parents were like, no, you don't need one. We aren't going to buy you one because that's unnecessary. I didn't get my first real, I suppose, I think it was my first hand-me-down iPhone well until I was in high school. Because it was just one of those, the new technology. Some parents bought it for their kids, and then the rest of us didn't. And we all thought it was super cool, but at the same time, we wasn't either financially there, or it was just like, no, you don't need it. You don't have the necessity for such a technology.
Yeah, you don't have the financial disposability to say that, you know, I'm going to buy this just to see if I need it, because it's not your money that you're using or whatever it may be, or it may be your money, but, you know, your parents having the scope of experience finances, they understand, do you need it? How badly do you want it? What's the scope of this? Is there anything else you need more? Kind of get you to appreciate perspective a little bit more and to gain perspective into your own situation.
No, wonderful points, guys. And it really is something I think we're coming steadily to a close on. Thinking back on it, I mean, we could get into the finite details of it. Really comes down to like personal opinion at a point with this kind of discussion where you really, you're gonna believe what you gotta believe based on what you know, and innately go back to. Doesn't mean you can't change, but there is a point in this conversation. We only know so much. We only can explain so much from our personal experience. Why I have trouble personally with this kind of stuff, and I suppose I tried to. I didn't really have a dedicated response time, but it was because I feel like the things I wanted to respond with were set on the table. And I honestly, I'm pretty content with my points. And I wanted to touch base with our members and see if there's anyone in the panel who would like to close with anything on the discussion portion.
Oh, I think Joanne had something that she wanted to add in.
Yeah, Joanne, if you still have that point, stage is yours.
Hi. I thought you were wearing a wig for a minute, and I realized it was your headphones. I was going to ask.
Yeah, man.
Like a wig.
It's a hell of a wig.
Gotta cover the widow's peak somehow, man.
I kind of wanted to touch on 2 points, if it's all right. I think
take your time.
I think Benjamin's the one who brought up the kids with social media and being exposed to a lot. And I have to admit, I have no idea what my kids are watching on social media. I don't monitor them very much. And that's not a great thing to admit to, but it's also, how do you control that when, I mean, there's parental controls, there's things like that, you know, that you could do, but it's really just about, do we really want to control what they see on the internet, or do we want them to kind of gain insight into things that may or may not be, you know, maybe they need to see some of the things that they're seeing on there to understand how the world works, you know, to understand that maybe that's, the world out there is not a kind place, but the world out there can also be a very kind place, you know, and kind of introduce them that way as well, which kind of ties into, I don't know if COVID was brought up at all. I thought it was.
I don't believe so today.
Masks were brought up, but that's it.
Masks, yeah.
With the morals and the ethics, COVID just kind of erased all of that. I feel people were stuck at home, and they just had this platform all of a sudden to really be vocal and really be out there with their ideas, their opinions, and all that. And I think from that point forward, anything that it's especially difficult now to have a moral compass that you feel good about because there's just everything, someone just took their hand and just smeared it across the board. And I really feel like that's kind of what's been happening. And so like that's why we do wrestle with it. That's why we do have points where we want to do what feels right. We want to do what is right, but people just don't have that compass as much anymore because there was no more filter. The filters all went away. It just kind of, I really feel like the morally and ethically, like our value system was really torn apart. That was it.
Yeah, seems to me like without direct human interaction, that we resort to our own core values and our own core instinct, and we really lose our sense of purpose within a tribe. I think we start to focus on only what's important to us, and truly lose our sense of social perspective, where we have to engage with other people and we have to be empathetic with other people. I don't really need to be empathetic with the Amazon delivery driver who drops off my new bedding, who drops off, the pizza guy who just did a contactless delivery. There truly is no compassion and no empathy in that environment. And I think they're not natural things to us because we have id and we have ego and we have the different aspects of what psychology would determine a personality is, that we're left with these things that truly need to be taught and then practiced over and over and over again, because they are not natural things to us for the most part. And actually, I want to tie this back in way earlier to my response to how do we deal with people with no empathy? And I truly believe that it's education. We need to hunker down on educating people in terms of values, in terms of perspective. And
I agree.
I'm glad you agree.
Sorry, I just really do adamantly agree on that point.
All right, that's good, actually.
Say something.
Of course.
I think things about like education and knowing and knowledge. Can we protect our children from the internet that has the ability of exposing them to everything? And it's like, well, no, you can't, because you could take them away from the internet, but now you're just setting them up for failure, because now, they're going to be isolated from their peers, or when they do go out into the world, it's going to be super overwhelming. But
exactly, this is going to circle into my next point, I think.
I think why people are very scared of the idea of the algorithm of like TikTok is that sometimes For You page might put up anything. And I've interacted with TikTok. I've seen some of her kids interact with TikTok, because, they're sharing the memes, and that, I want to be engaged because, I think it's kind of fun to see, what kids now think is funny compared to, when I was in 2007 and seeing memes, and sometimes I feel like an old man where I'm like, I don't see how that's funny, but okay. But it scares me too, is that, it's like, some of the things that pop on the For You page, that doesn't really seem appropriate. But like, for instance, it's like you could be scared that this kid is being exposed to maybe very adult content, or it's like, would it be morally right to more educate them on the idea of that, hey, listen, your physiological body can't regulate dopamine, and these certain things will make you, react in a certain way you'll flood your body with dopamine, and now you'll get into this addictive habit of addiction because you'll be exposed to these certain things. So it's probably not very good for you to do this, and I'm going to let you know about this. Then to just be like, well, we can't watch TikTok at all anymore because there's bad things on it, even though there's a lot of good things on TikTok. There's a lot of you get exposed to multiple dimensions of culture and reality. It's like a melting pot of good and bad. So instead of being worried about them being exposed to bad things, educate them on, well, this thing is bad, but why it's bad is because of A, B, and C, and you're kind of a child and you can't regulate your dopamine. And that's why we protected people from adult contact. We didn't let, kids wander into adult shops and stores. And now we can't really protect them from that, or wandering down, the magazine aisle with the adult content. Now we can't protect them from that because now the internet and the algorithms just, it's just flashing them with it and catching them off guard.
Do we actually need to protect our kids from that? It's what you're saying, like we need to educate them.
Well, that's
where our value systems come in, and that's where we, show them.
It's value systems, but that's why I was saying it was going into the science aspect of like, well, yeah, there's certain angles of things you could say, well, is it just a value thing? But that's where I'm more on the lines of we don't get exposed to certain things like gambling or adult content is due to the fact that there's a physiological thing that happens to us where we release dopamine, and then now your reward centers are all getting messed up, and now you're falling into a path of addiction. And when you're very young, your brain isn't fully developed, so you can go down a really dark path really fast. And I think that's where a lot of people get more concerned, because it's like some of those lessons people feel as though I feel like maybe need to be learned when they have matured more. And so it's like having a child and putting them on the road and driving right away that they're 12 years old. There's certain ages that are set up for a reason, but then at the same time, everyone's all different, and we all have different experiences and different levels of maturity too. So then there's even that falls into subjective concepts in itself.
Not everyone is going to understand the dopamine as well. Like, not everyone's going to get that whole point of the science behind all of that. That's where we would need to try to teach our value system and teach what we feel is morally or ethically wrong and right. And they're going to have to make those choices for themselves anyways at some point. And they will be at an age at some point where you won't have a choice in what they choose, and you can decide how you're going to react or respond to that. So then there's there's that piece of it as well. So allowing them to be exposed, like, do we really need to censor them? Probably to a point, because there are things that I hope my kids have not seen yet. There's just some really heinous things out there, but do we need to censor them? Probably not as much as we think, because they're going to have to make these choices for themselves, and we're just here to guide them through that, and essentially. So all we can do is just give them the best guidance we have with what we've got in our list of values that we carry with us, and try to show them, also through how we live our lives too as well. And then they see that, and they hopefully will mirror part of that. That was a really good point though, by the way.
Cactus, did you want to wrap up with your point right now, or I have a very brief excerpt I could put in after?
Yeah, go for your excerpt and I can...
Okay, perfect. The only thing I noticed from kind of that whole discussion there was something that stuck out to me was like, instead of micromanagement, micro exposure is effective in this sort of instance. It seems like for most individuals in modern society, micro exposure seems necessary due to future integrations with technology. I understand the frustration, and I think that what you were saying, Joanne, about not monitoring as much as you think maybe you should, or maybe speculating like how much a parent should do in general in that essence, because you want to have a healthy dynamic with your children. You don't want to feel like they're always looking at you like you're a negative figure, and that's understandable. Even as someone not being a parent like myself, I get that concept of why you do such things. I do feel like most parents out there feel the way you do. That they don't know how to handle it. They don't understand what the right decision is there. other than kind of conforming to it a little bit, to where they're gonna be exposed to some weird stuff sometimes, and you know what, they're hopefully you can instill values enough to where they know they have control over those kinds of things to a degree.
There's also that point too, that technology is still fairly new. So I'm an 80s baby, and so I grew up starting from nothing to a flip phone to like a pager, and like still using payphones and all of that, like going through the levels of technology. So this is all really new as well, and it's advanced really quickly, but it's still like my generation doesn't know what the heck. We're like, I don't know what to do. We're kind of paving the way, which kind of sucks, essentially.
Yeah, especially in the family aspect. I mean, it's a lot of people from your generation that have families now, and that is a big dilemma. You know, there's a lot of struggle with the economy, so there's a lot of people working, and they can't be direct one-on-one with their kids as much as they'd like to, especially with their educational journey. I know most parents want to homeschool their kids, but they can't.
Don't do it.
I think is that it's not micromanaging, but micro exposure. And it's like kind of guide them slowly and educate them. And it's like to break it down into bite-sized pieces, there's a lot more guidance than like overwhelming, I don't know what to do with this thing because there's like so much coming at me. I think the biggest thing I've noticed where it gets to that descent of a lot of people get upset is, for instance, if I would say like, if you know anything about Elsa Gate and YouTube, where like there's a lot of these channels popping up where they would make content where it's like Spider-Man and Elsa and like very childish content, but then they would entice adult themes in it of like violence and sexual themes and things like that. And that's where I think a lot of people got really shocked, because it was like in that nature of that context, it was very malevolent. They were like very much intentionally tying in very, very intense themes that was personally targeted towards children or the younger generation.
It does.
But you get where I'm saying is that I think that's where a lot of people get concerned, because it becomes some of that content is very, I find, and others find that it's very malevolent in nature. It's like your intentions are very put into this field, and that's where I can see where a lot of people get upset, because it's like this. When it gets to that level, it's like, okay, I'm taking this personal. You're like literally attacking my children, and you're purposely setting it up that way. Enticing, yeah.
Yeah, enticing and suggestive, but it also comes down to instilling proper, again, it kind of circles full back to the morals.
Yeah.
You have to provide balance the best you can as part of your family unit, from what I understand. I mean, again, I'm still learning. Everyone's my age is still learning this stuff.
Yeah.
But I do want to circle back to Cactus's point. He's got his thinking cap on over there, I can tell.
Yeah, please, Cactus.
I'm just waiting for everyone to finish, because I'm basically going to touch base on everything that everyone says. So I'm ready for everyone to wrap it up. That way I can just say what I have to say.
I do my stretch to brace.
All right, so like I was saying before, the solution to how to guide people in the field of morals when it comes to people who lack empathy. As we were discussing, we got a little bit off track there. It's about giving people the tools that they need to process information. It's about, morals is a societal construct. People who lack empathy, who lack understanding of those hierarchies, of those constructs, who don't put the same value into religious belonging, into spirituality, into financial equity, into freedom of information, whatever your value may be, that you don't value it the same as myself, as the next person. That is to say, we've all touched base that perspective, that experience and personal journey as a very large shaping on your collective whole. And because of that shaping, when you go to transfer that to the next generation, you're not necessarily trying to shield them from everything. I think protection from knowledge is a dangerous thing. Protection from environment, absolutely. But exposure to knowledge, micro exposure to knowledge, as we mentioned, is an incredibly good point, because you need to not overwhelm someone. People don't do well in situations where they feel neurologically overwhelmed, where they feel vastly stimulated. That is to say, most people, when under large amounts of emotional stimulus, won't make well-founded decisions. They will typically not think about the people around them. They will not think about the environment they're in. They'll think about what is the quickest avenue to the solution that we need. It becomes Occam's razor almost, where you seek the path of least resistance. And I feel as though that's where we fall into the group mentality, where we mentioned earlier that same thing applies in most cases to psychedelics. Yes, and that is very much it. The way that neurons connect under the influence of psychedelics is very interesting. But I think a very large part of our roles as parents, and I'm going to say this speaking as a person who just wishes to impart my knowledge onto others, not as a parent. So I may get some backlash for this opinion, but just understand this is an opinion. I feel as though if we, as mentors, as guides, as influences in our children's lives, in people's lives around us, we need to give them the tools to process the information the same as you or I could process it, the same as people we aspire to be like. Those are the people we want to deliver the tools to our children, to those around us. Because without those tools, it's very difficult to gain a sense of purpose and value within the tribe. It's very difficult to gain a sense of personal development and growth, and even a personal guideline, a moral system. It's hard to develop your own moral system, your own ethical systems without the influence of others. Because I can say that my opinion is right all day long, but I need outside influence to say, hey, I like that opinion, but here's where it differs from my perspective. Here's why my understanding is different from your understanding. Do you think we can bridge this gap and find a middle ground, or maybe end up diverging on a brand new path of learning? And that to me is a really important thing that we need to pass on to the next generation, especially when it comes to things regarding this field, morals, ethics, spirituality, and just general perspective.
Yeah, and even with what we're doing, discussion, it's important to be clear and communicative, that we don't emotionally damage someone from conversating. I mean, you never know where people stand on reasoning and again, like exposure. I've talked to a lot of people in the past that have done homeschool. Their social interactions are just very minimal. They can only handle so much. And do I blame them for it? No. It's just to remember that when I'm interacting, that there's no real social norm when it comes to how learning happens.
You also kind of need to be, well, you don't need to be, not you, but it's helpful to be understanding and willing to meet people where they are as well, and that includes people with less skill in the social arena. But I just really wanted to say, Aquatic Cactus, I completely agree with your statement about giving tools, because that's all we can do is give them. I don't really like that phrase, do you have that tool in your toolbox phrase that people use, but it's true. Like, we do.
Yeah.
that's all we can do is to do that. And I completely agree with that. Absolutely. Just wanted you to know there's no backlash from me.
That's good to hear.
Benjamin, did you want to make a point?
Yeah, but I just completely forgot it. So carry on.
Yeah, welcome to my world. And see how we get along. Well, honestly, I know Jeff's got to close out pretty soon here, and we're going to wrap things up. But Jeff, do you have any closing statements for the audience today? What did you think of our discussion? I think we went far enough.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. One at a time, guys. Jeff?
there's a lot of rabbit holes you could fall down on the way to where we are right now. I'll just say that as far as protecting kids from the internet, well, it's kind of like protecting them from bad neighborhood, you know. I'll equate it to the south side of Chicago, you know. You tell your kids about it and tell them that they shouldn't go there, but they're going to probably still go there, you know. And if they survive, well, then they're better off for it. But if you tell them, you know, you mustn't ever go there, then they're going to want to go there to look and see even more. So.
Yeah, people want reasonings. They want well-founded understanding, and typically, you know, there's no better experience than first-hand experience, as they say. You know, someone could tell you how awful something is, but until you're there experiencing it, you don't have that connection in your brain, and you just have, oh wow, that's a scary story, and it's just so distant. You're just so separate from it that it's so hard to truly connect the danger of those things, or, you know, the gravity of the situation.
And
I agree.
Cameron, regarding your last remark, that's called old-timers disease.
Oh man, yeah, it's stubborn head syndrome, I'll tell you that much. You just keep hitting at it and hope that somehow it's going to form the thought a little better each time. But
you pack it as full as you can, and you hope the right thing pops out when you need it.
Yeah, maybe if I extend my hat up a little bit, put some extra brain in there.
Yeah.
Get a little bit better reception.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun. I appreciate the chat. Nice to see you again, Joanne. Hopefully you'll join us again in the future, and I'm on my way to church. So
I definitely enjoyed this Discord.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, this has been really great. Like, I really appreciate it. It's good to see you too, Jeff.
Yeah. See you guys later.
Hey, you have a great day, Jeff. Have Merry Christmas to you.
Thanks for coming, Jeff.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
We'll go ahead and close out with the rest of our members here. Matthew and Joanne, do you have any statements you want to close with? Anyone or any wishes for the holidays?
I think that's for you. I'm having some emotional issues with the holiday this year. But I hope you guys have a great Christmas and a New Year, right? Because this isn't back for another couple weeks, but
yeah, exactly. It won't be until the New Year.
Great, really great conversating with you guys today. I really enjoyed it. So
all I can say is there's always something to be thankful for, Joanne. The fact that you made it today in good health is something to be thankful for.
Yes. I'm thankful. I'm just having issues with it. That's all.
Trust me, I think we all are. It's okay. It's a human reaction to have the yin and yang, you know.
I think we can all say that. As you say, I think we can all say that we're happy to have you here on the podcast, and that you could join us for today's episode.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is really great. So, I'm gonna pass it over to Matt though. Yeah, thank you again.
Yeah,
it's been really awesome.
Yeah, whip it on over.
I am.
Throw it at him.
Yeah. Pop it.
Wait, can I have him back?
What?
Can I have those back so I can throw them at you?
Oh,
Oh yeah, take 2. Oh, you would
That was
too.
amazing.
The Oscar goes to
it didn't hurt.
Grammy, Oscar. I don't know.
Leave it to the artist, guys.
Whatever award.
Oh.
Smelling salt. Oh,
Yes, Mr.
Being overstimulated right now. Take a second.
Welcome to the podcast.
Assault, haha, you've been assaulted, funny.
Oh,
Yeah, it's hilarious.
As a chef,
yeah,
I appreciate assault puns.
I will say, it's a really good assault pun.
I'm insulted we didn't use more.
oh gosh. Oh my god. No.
Okay.
you were saying, Matthew?
I was saying, okay. Thank you again for inviting me onto the podcast. This has been it's been really fun. You enrich my life, I will say, from just your guys' knowledge and being able to communicate with like others of your guys' intellect is just it's just I feel it's fulfilling, and just thank you for that. I think this episode's been really fun, and like I feel like I've gained some knowledge, and also just once again, just like really, it's been a really nice conversation. So, Merry Christmas to you all, and I hope you guys have a good holiday. If you looked behind me, there's a couple. I got some of my presents that I used as like background props, but
I wonder if they're paintings.
take all these and take all
They're
these.
painted
behind
presents.
me.
You literally just drew small canvases, painted presents.
What?
Oh, you painted your wrapping paper. That would be the worst.
He didn't wrap the presents, just painted.
Oh yeah.
Let's continue this trend, of this. It's really, yeah. I'm good.
You take where you have and where you're at, and it's just experiences like this where you keep yourself open to new experiences and knowledge, and constantly learning and evolving. As long as you can keep adapting upwards, and allow yourself empathy and compassion to go descend up and down, but constantly gaining more knowledge and being aware.
Yeah, and as someone just completely separate from your specific group, I just want to say thank you guys for joining us. It's been refreshing having you, Matthew, the past few episodes, and you today.
Yeah, well, I think this is a good place to close. We're getting ready for the holidays, so I don't want to keep everyone too long. I really appreciate everyone being a part of today's episode on this panel and in the audience. If you make it this far, I am both thankful and sorry. So not every episode is going to be so chaotic, but we're going to, it's for the fun of the holidays, and keep a lot of this stuff in because why not? We're here to present ourselves to you and have fun doing it, and want to bring some joy to you this season as well. And if this show can help you with that, so be it. I'm happy for that. I look forward to next year recording, and you'll actually see us next year. Thinking about it now. So we'll see you in 2024.
That Cameron, as he said, we won't be doing our next episode recording until January the 7th. Then we won't be publishing until January 10th or 11th. So look out for that in the new year, but this episode will obviously be published before that. You get your last dose of the Intellectual Adventure podcast to take you into the new year. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a wonderful journey, and I'm so glad to have you. See you next year.